And we are back with Mark Schofield. This is Locked On Chiefs. Thank you for listening. We really do appreciate it. I am really looking forward to this episode. This is an episode I look forward to just about every year, talking about Patrick Mahomes, his progression through his career in the NFL, and really where he is going and what he has been doing this season. Like I said, this is Mark Schofield. We're going to be talking about Patrick Mahomes all day today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
I am Chris Clark, host of the Locked On Chiefs podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Chiefs your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Really do appreciate it. Today's episode is brought to you by Crossover Thursdays, presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is so much fun and it's easy to play. No competing with other players. Just you versus the projections available. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. You can literally take less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love PrizePicks, and we know what you will too. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. All right, lots to talk about with Patrick Mahomes, and I just want to preface this by saying I still do have a cold, so I apologize ahead of time if I start coughing. I will try to power through the best I can. He is Mark Schofield. Mark, I'll let you tell them where you are right now.
Well, Chris, it's great to be back with you, and actually it's a little bit easier. It used to be I'd have this long list of titles and places where I was, but now it's just SB Nation, right over at SBNation.com, NFL writer and more. The focus is NFL, but I do a lot of different stuff over there. But it's great to be with you, man. How you been? I know you're sick. I know you're fighting the cold, but otherwise you good?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's hard to really complain. Team's 14-3. You got the guy that's probably should be the front runner and maybe unanimous MVP this year based on the way he's played. But I'll let you talk about him here in just a moment. But yeah, I'm doing really well. I think that this is going to be a fun fun postseason to watch.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great postseason to watch. And I think, it's amazing that, and Mahomes himself sort of talked about this the other day. He's the sort of, old man in the AFC playoffs. He's the oldest of the starting quarterbacks, which I think is hilarious. Sort of tells you where this conference is right now in terms of quarterback talent and, how incredible it's going to be to watch the AFC over the next couple of years. And you've got guys, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, and of course, Patrick Mahomes, among the young talent in that conference. It's going to be fascinating to watch the AFC for the next couple of years.
It definitely is going to be a lot of fun to watch the AFC for the next couple of years. And it just floors me to think that Mahomes is the elder statesman. And Ryan and I actually talked about that on Tuesday. He's the elder statesman in this playoffs. And it looks like it's probably going to be this way for the next several years, I would imagine. Unless you have a certain somebody maybe coming back to the AFC after being in the AFC for a couple of seasons.
Yeah, you might see something like that. Although I do think that the person we're referring to there, it might not happen in the Northeast. It might happen out West. I have this idea, this belief in the back of my mind that Tom Brady is going to do what many veterans in the show business world do, which is go out and have their Vegas residency, at the end of their careers. I mean, you've got Def Leppard out in Vegas right now. You've got Aerosmith. I know they put their Vegas residency on pause with Steven Tyler having a medical situation this past year, but Aerosmith's out with their Vegas residency. Celine Dion has a Vegas residency. So why not Tom Brady with a little Vegas residency of his own? I thought, when Brady left New England a couple of years ago, I thought, look, he's going to Tampa Bay. I said that the morning after they lost to the Titans in that playoff game. And so I got one Brady prediction right. Maybe I'll get a second. But yeah, it's fascinating to see the way this AFC has unfolded this season. It's fascinating to see, the way the quarterback position has evolved. And obviously, I think Mahomes and what he's done since coming out of college has been a big part of that evolution of the quarterback position. And it's interesting, Chris, we had the unfortunate and untimely passing of Mike Leach a couple weeks ago, and it's certainly a sad situation. A man, a coach that impacted so many lives, both on the field and off. There were a lot of Chrissy Freud, for example, who covers Mississippi State, talked and did a fantastic piece on her relationship with Mike Leach. He touched a number of lives. People look at the air raid, as one of his legacies among the many things that he left us with. I think the trend at the quarterback position, and seeing NFL teams not just run air raid concepts, but warm up to the idea of air raid quarterbacks at the National Football League level, including Patrick Mahomes and others, I think is another thing that Mike Leach left for us, and we're better for it. Because you're seeing what these quarterbacks can do at the next level. It's been fascinating to see, and I think we're going to continue to see more of that over the next couple of years.
And then that part of it is crazy to me because 10 years ago, you started talking about air raid quarterbacks. They would never catch on in the NFL. It was too advanced. You couldn't do that in the NFL. The defense was too good. Now you're seeing a trend where it flips and you're able to get some of that stuff done. So that's going to be fascinating to watch. I have to ask, and we're going to go to a break here in just a moment, but before we do that, I want to ask you specifically, in your opinion, is Mahomes the runaway MVP candidate at this point?
I don't know if he's the runaway candidate. I mean, I haven't really sort of sat down and decided, I think I've got a PFWA MVP ballot that I got to submit. The two that it's come down to in my mind are Hurts and Mahomes. And the argument for Hurts is you see what that team is without him, right? And Jason Kelce, the center for the Philadelphia Eagles, said, look, everything we do offensively, run game, pass game, starts with Jalen Hurts. And so I think there's an argument to be made for Hurts, given what we've seen the past couple of weeks. But then I always come back to the idea that we grade Patrick Mahomes, whether it's in discussions like MVP, whether it's just discussions about the quarterback position, on a different scale. I just said that, look, I rewatched his game against the Raiders, and I laughed. I cackled that first touchdown. I scared my son. Owen and I were watching it together. And that first touchdown, the 3rd and goal from the 2, where he just buys time and sort of flips it for the touchdown. I literally cackled. And I think Owen thought I was having a stroke or something. He thought I was, something was happening to me. But it was just, he does these things that wow us, that blow us away. But then this morning, when I'm rewatching that game, it's the little things that he does that are still so impressive, with his eyes, his pocket movement, the stuff that might not show up on a stat sheet, the stuff that certainly won't lead SportsCenter, won't lead, NFL Live, but the stuff that matters so much at the position. For all the great things that he does, the splash plays, the off-platform stuff, he plays the quarterback position fundamentally very well. Is he a runaway MVP? Maybe. I think Hurts is going to get some votes. I don't know if Mahomes will be unanimous, but over what we've seen from this past year, I think there's a reason he's the favorite.
Well, and the big thing for me, and what I keep going back to when I start looking at the MVP, is everybody thought he was going to have a down year because Tyreek Hill was gone. And best season he's ever had in his career.
No down year. Yeah. I mean, and we talked about this. I remember, Chris, in the summer, we talked about, the expectations for this offense going into the year, and we basically came to this joint conclusion is he's Patrick Mahomes. He's fantastic. Like, he's going to be okay. I think he saw he's more than okay.
Yeah, and the one thing I will point out, and one thing you said that I really like, is it's the small things that he does. And yes, that touchdown, and I understand the one you're cackling about, was great. And him being able to just kind of pitch the ball to McKinnon to get the touchdown is fantastic. But it's everything that leads up to that play. It's his ability to break the pockets. It's his ability to buy time, to run, perpendicular to the first down line and make sure he doesn't cross that first down the line of scrimmage. I apologize. And be able to make some of those types of plays and some of those types of throws. His spatial awareness is phenomenal. And that really is something that never gets talked about. His ability to just be able to find space to be able to do those types of plays is one of the things that makes him special.
Yeah, it's fantastic. There was actually a play a little later in the game, where it's a 1st and 10 at the 4:42 mark. He's got near immediate pressure, bails, but just creates that space. But my favorite was much later in the game. 12:55 marker, the 4th quarter. It's a 2nd and 2. And it's that subtle pocket movement because the spatial awareness, the lateral movement skills, the athleticism, creating outside the pocket is fantastic. But then you see this play and it's more like the guy we were just talking about, Tom Brady. It's not, a scramble. It's not a run to throw type of thing. It's just climbing the pocket, feeling that subtle pressure, climbing a little bit and creating space to make a throw. That's the subtle pocket movement that sometimes goes unnoticed when we talk about the plays like the McKinnon touchdown from earlier in the game.
And when we get back, we're going to talk a lot more about Patrick Mahomes, the season overall, and what he has meant to this franchise. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis to get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, which is over at this point, with a disappointing national championship game just a bit, to basketball and the World Cup. We've got it all covered at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use the mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And then I also want to tell you about our friends over at Ultimate Football GM. I really enjoyed playing this game. You need to check it out. I am really geeked out about our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, drafting players, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Chiefs listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, so make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Mark. Let's just dive into Mahomes here. I really don't even know where to start. We could talk about the Raiders game. We can talk about anything that he's done all season. What really stood out to you about what he changed this year from past seasons?
I think there was a play in this game where you saw him answer, and he had done it earlier in this year. And so this isn't just the sort of moment where you're like, oh, it's clicked for him. He had done this throughout the year. But I remember we talked this summer going into this season. One of the questions that he was going to have to answer based on how last year ended, based on the loss of Tyreek Hill and the changes offensively and the personnel around him, is patience. He was going to have to be more patient at times. He was going to have to, whether it's taking check downs or taking some easier throws, rather than sort of force the issue, like be a little bit more patient, take what the defense gives him. And, at the end of that first quarter against the Raiders, they've got sort of a hiccup variant where you've got, post corner route, over route, and he's got the post corner, the deeper route open, but he's also got the crosser. They're both open. And I think in some years past, maybe even last season, he probably would have taken the deeper shot, but he took the easier throw. He took the easier throw on a 15-yard crosser instead of the 25-yard corner route. And again, both routes were open, but it's just that sort of, I'm just going to, the defense is giving me this. It's a little bit of an easier throw. I'll just take it. I don't need to force that. That shows you that there's been some growth. There's been this idea that, hey, if the defense is going to give me this route or this check down or this opportunity or this free access release, I'll just take that. I don't have to push the ball downfield. I don't have to do everything. And I think that was a big part of their success this year, his growth this year. I think that's been a huge step for him throughout his time in the National Football League. Because if you think back to him coming out of college, it was he's too much of a gunslinger. He takes too many chances. He's never going to sort of take what the defense gives him. And he's shown over the course of his career, and certainly this year, his ability to do that. What's really fascinating me conceptually about this offense is the use of 12 and 13 personnel. Their first big play on Saturday, the sort of, motion vert, 13 personnel. They've done some fascinating stuff out of 13 personnel. I wrote about it over at SB Nation earlier this year where, you really put a defense in a bind. I mean, if you're a defensive coordinator, your first thought is, I want to stop Patrick Mahomes. They're going to throw the ball. We're going to play soft coverages. We're going to play quarters. We're going to keep everything in front of us. We're going to put 6, 7, 8 defensive backs on the field, however many you think you need to do. Are you going to do that against a 13 personnel look when you know that Reed and Bieniemy, if they see that, they're just going to run the ball, right down your throat? And so I think the evolution of a vertical passing game out of 13 personnel is a nice little wrinkle to have for this offense.
Well, and I'm glad you bring that up because when you start talking about playing, 2 and 3 tight end sets, Kansas City does that more. I won't say they do it the most in the NFL, but they do it a lot. And the thing that I love about it is until it's a little different now because Blake Bell is the third tight end versus when it was a guy like Jody Fortson, who is more of a Travis Kelce-esque type wide receiver type tight end. I'm not calling him Travis Kelce, just to be clear.
Right.
But he's more of that receiving tight end versus Blake Bell is more of a blocking type tight end. But when you start bringing in that 13 personnel, you're absolutely right. I mean, defenses are going to try to load up on, they're going to figure you're going to run the ball more a little bit. And then you do shot plays like that. And the beauty of that design was Justin Watson was almost at full speed running when that ball was snapped.
Yeah, it's an absolutely tremendous design, and it gets you sort of to the idea of motion for information versus motion for impact. It's, I've written about this, others have talked about it as well. It used to be that, as an offensive coordinator or play designer, you use motion to sort of give the quarterback information, right? You're going to do it to give a man versus zone indicator or, whatever you want to sort of give the quarterback an inkling to pre-snap. You can use motion to get the defense to sort of tip their hand. But defenses have done a much better job in recent years at combating that. It used to be, you send a guy in motion, cornerback trails him. It's like, oh, this is man coverage, right? Rome was up in the booth saying it's man coverage. I'm writing about it on Monday morning. Oh, the quarterback knew it was man coverage. Now defenses will trail you and drop into zone. Or you'll send somebody in motion, nobody trails it. They'll just play man out of it. And they'll just do it at the snap. And then as a quarterback, you've thought, oh, it's coverage X, but now, oh, wait, no, it's actually Y. In the time it takes me to just say that, you've got to get the ball out of your hands. And so defenses have done such a better job at adjusting to that to take away the motion for information. So now teams are using motion for impact, having guys move in at the snap. You see the problems that it creates for defenses. You can see the problems that it created for the Raiders on that play. So I think that's certainly a big part of it. The other thing is, look, I've always been of the mind that you throw out of heavy, you run out of light. We saw the Rams years ago. They go 11 personnel, teams play light, they run the football. You go 13 personnel like the Chiefs have done. You think about the incredible throw Mahomes had earlier in the year against the Chargers. That came out of a 13 personnel look, vertical concept out of 13. You get a tight end matched up on a linebacker or a strong safety. In many cases, that's going to be a win for you. And it was for the Chargers on that play. And so, this is a game about matchups. Every time I go to the combine, every time I go to the Senior Bowl, you talk to play designers, head coaches, offensive coordinators, and they say it's a game about matchups. Using 13 personnel the way they have has been a nice addition to this offense this year, and it puts defensive coordinators in a big bind.
Well, and not only does it put them in a big bind, but then you start getting to the point where you start using those other tight ends. You get Blake Bell on a bigger pass play, I believe, against the Broncos. So it's not this past week, but the week before. And Noah Gray has been a guy that they've been trying to get more involved in the offense over the past couple of months as well.
They ran a tight end screen to Noah Gray out of 11 personnel against the Raiders. I was rewatching that, and I saw the play come up on my screen, and I'm like, this is a tight end screen. I know that, but Noah Gray out of 11? Like, really? I mean, and if you're a defensive coordinator, right, you see the Chiefs break the huddle with 11. You've got your quality assistants holding up the 11, and you see it's Noah Gray as the tight end. You're thinking 15 other plays or concepts before tight end screen to Noah Gray, which tells you the diabolical minds of Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy and what they can do with this offense right now.
Well, and then we haven't even talked about the new weapon that they were allowed to add in mid-season with Kadarius Toney, who brings in a whole nother element of something that they haven't had. And I will say this, Kadarius Toney brings an element that Tyreek Hill didn't even have. The lateral ability for him to move, his agility and the ability for him to get, going sideways and juking players, that is going to be something that's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
It is. And, the change of direction skills that he has, the things that he can do with the football in his hands before the football arrives, they're absolutely fascinating to watch. And, when the Giants drafted Toney, I thought, this is a great weapon There are things that you can do with him. There are things that you can do sort of getting him out of the backfield, get him isolated on some situations, some mismatches. Maybe he won't be in every down slot receiver, but you can put together a package of like 20 plays and just have some fun with him. Let him be a human joystick. And I think as we get into the playoffs and deeper into the playoffs, and we've seen some of it as well, they're going to manufacture some touches for him where he's going to be in the game to do one or two different things. And he's got the ability with those lateral movement skills, the change of direction skills, to make a huge play, to like have a game-breaking type of moment, whether it's the divisional round, championship game, beyond, where it might just be, he's on the field for 12 snaps, but they're critical ones and they're explosive ones.
Yeah, and Ryan and I have talked about this a lot throughout the entire time that he's been here. This was a trade for 2023 regular season. This wasn't a trade for this year. Anything that he does this year is bonus in my mind. Yeah. I think that they wanted him here. They wanted to see if they can get him available and ready to play, and they obviously have. But he's not going to know the full offense. He's not going to be fully effective until next season. But it's exactly what you just said. They can get him 20 to 40 plays of this is what you're going to be doing, and they can get him involved in enough to where it's going to be very impactful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's the ideal way to look at it was, this was a first-round pick, a guy that people were really excited about coming out of Florida. You're acquiring him for 23 and beyond. Give him some time to get up to speed to learn the full offense. But he's shown you and what he's done in bits and spurts already, he can be a contributor down the stretch. And again, it gets us back to the idea of mismatches, right? Like, if you're in a 13 personnel package with a back, 3 tight ends, and Kadarius Toney, like that's a lot to think about. If you're a defensive coordinator, if you're a linebacker on the defensive side of the ball, like what are they going to do here? There's a lot you can do in that kind of personnel package. And so I'm very curious, very excited, honestly, to see how he's used in the playoffs.
Well, and not only that, but then you start thinking about Mecole Hardman and him have not been really on the field together at all this season. And Hardman coming back for the playoffs and being available for the playoffs, and you add his vertical speed to the lateral ability of Toney and what you can do diametrically between those two guys, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And you start talking about, 13 personnel is what we've been talking about, but having those two guys on the field in 12 personnel would still give you a lot of different options of what you could do.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm firmly of the mind that as an offensive play caller, you want to force the defense to defend every single blade of grass out there. And, you mentioned Hardman, his vertical speed, what he can do downfield, and Toney, what he can do sort of laterally, stress at a defense, sideline to sideline, line of scrimmage to deep. And then you've got a quarterback that with his eyes and arm alone can stress you and force you to defend, every single blade of grass on the field. That's going to be tough for defenses here in the postseason.
And when we get back, we're going to talk more about Patrick Mahomes and the postseason, because I think that's really where we need to focus for this last segment, and there's going to be a lot to talk about. But I want to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you've got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, when you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then, man, I've got just a thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they are so delicious you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. They come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built Bar does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is they are healthy, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about how you built your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie, batter, and churro. You can thank me later. All right, Mr. Schofield, what are you expecting to see? Growth-wise for Mahomes in this playoffs?
Well, I think what I'm really curious to see is, do we see that continuation of patience that we've seen over the course of the season, that we saw Saturday, when it gets to be in that sort of potential one and done environment, and then we saw how it ended last year. Chiefs had that lead. Bengals start using the drop 8 that we talked about over the summer and earlier this season as well. Frustrated him a little bit, started to press a little bit, started to try to create a little bit. He had the back-to-back sacks to sort of close out that final drive in regulation. And so that's what I want to see. If we get into a situation where, they get down early or they have a punt or two on their first couple of possessions in their divisional round game, whoever they end up facing in the divisional round, does he start to press? Or do we see what we've seen from him this year, which is, I don't need to force this. I don't need to push the envelope too much. I've got an opportunity, to take the crossing route, referencing that play I talked about earlier. So that's what I'm most curious to see, Chris. Like, if he gets into that situation where he feels like I've got to do too much with his arm, do they get into trouble? Or do we see that continued growth in that idea that, look, I don't need to hit the home run. I can hit a double in the gap. We're going to be just fine.
The interesting thing to me is it sure felt like in November and in December, Kansas City started to just kind of coast. They looked like they were scheming up really good plays to start the game, and then they just kind of hit a lull in the middle of the game for most of the second half of the season. But it sure seemed like they turned it around against the Raiders, and they came back and they started getting to the point where they were still being more creative and they were attacking in different ways that I haven't seen all season. I'm really curious to see. I think that that's the team you're going to see in the playoffs, and I think that they put that on film for the playoffs because they want teams to have to think about those types of plays that they're running against the Raiders.
Yeah, and I think that what I saw conceptually from the Chiefs on Saturday was fascinating. I mean, you saw, we tend to think of, air raid versus West Coast versus Air Coryell, these different schools of offensive philosophy. And now every team steals concepts and designs from every different school. Like, there's no pure West Coast, although I guess the Chargers might be a pure West Coast team right now. But for the most part, teams are stealing from everything. And you saw a little bit of everything. You saw vertical stuff out of the Coryell school, whether it's out of 13 or 12 or 11. You saw some West Coast stuff. You saw some air raid stuff. I mean, the 32 play, the McKinnon touchdown that I was cackling about, that was mesh. I mean, that was a mesh concept. So, they really sort of showed in that game that, like, look, we've got a massive playbook. You saw mirrored smash, you saw Hank, you saw all these designs from the different school of, offensive philosophy. So that was fascinating to see too. I'd expect that to continue. And it's that sort of creativity where you're going to give a defensive coordinator, whoever they end up facing in the divisional round, so much stuff to prepare for the week headed into that game.
Well, and not only do they have so many things that they can call, but then they also have 2 trick plays that they ran against the Raiders.
And and the right around the rosy carousel play. This is a sport. This is a game. It's supposed to be fun. I thought it was fun. Like, I know some people have said, look, it was childish. It was disrespectful. Stop it. I mean, stop the play. And,
Exactly.
Look, teams run trick plays. Teams will show you different things. I mean, if you're the Chiefs, you probably thought going into that game, hey, we want to get this on film to give teams something to think about. Like, now, whoever they face is going to have to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour thinking about, okay, this is what we're going to have to do if we see this. And that's 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour that they're not worried about 13 personnel and vertical concepts out of 13. Like, that's the point.
Exactly. And not only do they have to worry about that specific play, but they have to worry about, well, what can they do coming out of that type of design? I mean, not even just the ring around the rosy, which was really just window dressing to the actual play design itself. What can they do with that wildcat formation, and what can they do with Tony on the field and Travis Kelce and McKinnon getting the snap and all that? So that was fascinating. And then you see a 320 or 340-pound defensive lineman line up at running back and run basically a wheel route.
Yeah. I mean, I said earlier that, like, Reed, Bieniemy, they're kind of diabolical minds with what they could scheme up. That plays a perfect example. What they did, these sort of trick designs, because again, it's going to give defensive coordinators more stuff to worry about, and that they've probably got 2 or 3 wrinkles off of that package that we're going to see at some point, whether it's next weekend, championship games, Super Bowl, wherever the Chiefs end up, at some point we're going to see something fun out of that look.
Yeah, and they're going to continue to play, and they're going to continue to have fun. And the thing that we always seem to forget is that Andy Reid is such a player's coach. He is letting his players have fun. The players are the ones that designed that ring around the rosy thing. Say what you want about it, be pissed off about it. But like you said, Mark, if you're an NFL team, just go stop it.
Yeah. I mean,
then you don't have to talk about
it. And, I think the point about, letting the players come up with stuff, letting the players have input on designs, even if it's just a trick play, I think that's an important point, in terms of the culture, the locker room, and things like that. These are professional athletes. They're getting paid. Like, I think if maybe some of the Raiders players were a little bit upset by it, but, the Chiefs are a very forward-thinking coaching staff. There's a great Twitter account at The Honest NFL, and I think it was like 2 months ago, the account sort of went through the Chiefs like opening game script. And this is somebody who's had some experience with Reid disciples. And this account walked through the opening game script and the reasons why they might show a formation, a motion, a shift, because they thought going into that game, look, this is how they defend this shift. This is how they defend this bunch. We want to confirm that in our opening game script, that our preconceived notions of how they're going to defend this are true. So then we can set up something later in the game. This is something that smart play callers, play designers, offensive minds do. And so the fact that they called that in week 18 tells me they're setting something up for weeks 20 and beyond.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing about Kansas City and Andy Reid and his ability to call plays and design plays, really. The other thing that I want to talk about really quick before I let you go, we talked a little bit about Tyreek Hill earlier, but you look at this Chiefs receiving core, you don't have a guy that's over 1,000 yards other than Travis Kelce, but it's the pieces that brought everything together, and Mahomes still threw for over 5,000 yards with just the pieces of what this receiving core was.
Yeah. And I'm reminded, Chris, of the Randy Moss, Tom Brady era. And there was a stretch of time where obviously the two made a dynamic, combination. But near the end of that, and even in stretches, certainly when that 2007 season near the end when Brady was trying to set a touchdown record, it seemed like he was forcing the ball to Randy Moss. And there were certain corners of the Patriots world that thought, we need to get back to the days before Randy Moss where Tom Brady's favorite receiver was the open receiver. And I think some of that may have played out this year as well, right? When you have, and certainly Tyreek Hill, game-breaking type of talent, so tough to defend, so explosive, so dangerous, it's natural as a quarterback to think, oh, it's 3rd and 7, where's Tyreek? Where's 10? I got to get him the football. You remove that a little bit, and you get back to the idea of when you have Reid, when you have Bieniemy, when you have the stuff that they're dialing up, Mahomes' favorite receiver this year was the open guy. You get back to that a little bit. And you've seen this with other quarterbacks. I remember, Stafford playing with Calvin Johnson. Yeah, you're going to want to throw to Megatron, even if he's triple covered on 3rd and 7. Then you saw Johnson retires, and you see Stafford take a little bit of step forward in his game because he's now just sort of working to that open receiver. And so I think part of that was at work here, Chris, which was, I don't have 10. Yes, I've got Kelce. They've still got talent. We know this. But now, look, if that receiver that I want to throw to is covered, that's okay because somebody else is going to be open, and that's going to be my favorite receiver on this down.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic way to look at it because I think that that's going to play into playing a game like the Bengals again. If they play the Bengals in the playoffs, I think that is going to be something that's going to be huge because the Bengals really focused on taking away Kelce and Hill last season, and they can still try to focus on taking away Kelce. That's fine, but you got guys like Juju, you got guys like Noah Gray, you have to a lesser extent MBS and McCole Hardman and Sky Moore and all those guys and Kadarius Toney. And that doesn't even get into the guy that had one of the biggest plays on Saturday in Justin Watson, who has been hit or miss as well this season. And then you talk about the running backs. McKinnon has been a phenomenal player out of the backfield. I mean, it's just you look at this offense, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch in the postseason. Mark, thank you so much for coming on today. I really do appreciate it. Any last parting words you want to talk about?
Well, look, the AFC playoffs are going to be a ton of fun. I'm really excited. We got some fascinating games this weekend, and it's interesting. For the fifth time since 1970, every single playoff game this weekend is a rematch, which makes it easy for us to sort of look back and find some things to write about. But Chris, always a blast, my friend. Hope you feel a bit better. You get a week to rest up because obviously, look, we know this time of year nobody's at 100%, but you get a week to sort of rest up, get close to 100% for the divisional round, my friend, and I hope you're well.
Appreciate that, sir. That is going to be it for us today. We will be back tomorrow. Ryan and I are going to talk about this the wild card round, and then start talking and getting ready for the divisional round the next week. Thank you all for listening today, and we will talk